About damn time. What's up guys, it's been a long time since I've talked about Valkyria Chronicles, but today is a time for celebration as Valkyria Chronicles 4 is finally released on PC. But at a hefty $60, not all of us are going to be able to enjoy it immediately. Not me, I may or may not have sold my soul to get it ASAP. But for those people, I present a video that should have been done a long time ago. Let's take a look at some mods. Now, while anyone who's been around long enough to see my Let's Play might expect this video to be all about a certain rebounce mod, don't blow up, don't blow up, don't blow up, don't blow up, damn it! I actually want to cover a few visual modifications first, starting with a few canvas tweaks by DAOWAce. This mod's primary function is to remove the white canvas effect from the game. Now, I know that does sound like blasphemy for longtime VC fans, but it does have its own appeal. The mod optionally can also tweak the hatching effect present in the game, most notably with the shadows. It comes in several different types, including no canvas with streaks, no canvas or streaks, and no canvas, no streaks, and increased shadows. There are more variations, including one that makes the canvas effect take up the entire screen, but I'm only going to showcase the three here. Now, while the difference between streaks and no streaks is kinda minor, the increased shadow effect does make the game look very striking. I really like the effect, but it does get a bit messy in command mode. So I settled on using the no canvas or streaks for the remainder of the video, because it does make the game look nicer in general, but I'd be lying if I didn't say the canvas and hatching effects are part of Valkyria Chronicles' identity, and without them the game does look a bit more generic. Next up is a very simple mod, but a very useful one for anyone who's played Valkyria Chronicles on its home system, the PlayStation 3. VCPS3 Buttons does exactly what the name implies and replaces the PC standard Xbox buttons with their PlayStation equivalent. Interestingly enough, from what I've heard, the PlayStation buttons are trademarked by Sony, so most games are unable to add them in, even if you're using a DualShock controller. So with that being the case, modders to the rescue. Okay, with those small mods out of the way, it's time to cover the gameplay overhauls. The things that really just make the entire Valkyria Chronicles experience that much more enjoyable. But before I get started, let me just note that the two upcoming mods were recorded on a save that did not initially have any mods installed, and both of these mods do need to be played on new saves to prevent certain bugs with equipment. With that said, let's start out with Gallian Crossfire by Busards. Gallian Crossfire is a complete rebalance of the vanilla gameplay experience, and while I will be going over some of the more important changes, I do recommend you take a look at the Steam guide for the mod for a complete breakdown of all of its features. So first off, one of the most important changes is that Alicia, Largo, and Rosie are no longer special. They no longer give extra CP for deploying them, and they can now die permanently. This is a bit messy because Largo and Rosie, they both will still show up in cutscenes despite being dead, but Alicia is required in a certain portion of the game, so her death will hardlock the story campaign at some point. The next noticeable change is the stat and AP redistribution. All units in the game have had their accuracies improved, so snipers and tanks are no longer borderline useless at the start of the game. Compounding that, enemies in the game have had all their stats increased to match the players, making them more accurate and deadly at a range. And all classes outside of the Scout and Engineer have had increased AP so they can get around more easily. The most important change overall though has to be the change to interception. Shock troopers now have a wider interception radius, while snipers and AT cannons are now able to intercept like other regular weapon types. These changes remove most of the obvious paths to victory in Valkyria Chronicles, since most areas are now guarded by active sniper fire, and even tanks are in danger of advancing right into the open arms of armor-piercing rounds. Make no mistake, regardless of what I talk about going forward, nothing is more game-changing in today's video than snipers being able to intercept, and unsurprisingly, this can make many easy mode missions turn into nightmare marathons since the game wasn't balanced with intercepting snipers in mind.
Pretty sure Master Hunter has sight of everything that goes on there, but we're gonna take a shot.
I'll do my best.
Carl, I hate to do this to you, but you're gonna be a test dummy. Nash, can you shoot me here?
Hostile spot.
Shoot Carl. Oh my god.
So dark.
Now in regards to cheese threats like scout rushing and lancer mine clearing, you can kiss them both goodbye. Scout rushing is much harder in this game due to more accurate and harder hitting enemies, and lancers have had their explosive resistances nerfed, though it is still higher than other units so they can eat a few mines, but it will hurt. Next, let's talk tanks. Certain enemy types have had their versus armor stats increased so that tanks can no longer just run past them, and enemy radiators have gotten their resistances increased so that it is harder to kill a tank with a simple scout, again weakening scout rushing. An interesting thing about this change is that managing your tank in these situations becomes very much about paying attention to gameplay mechanics, because while normally certain enemies can just chew through your tank, if your defense is past a certain threshold via upgrades or potentials, it goes right back to taking 0 damage from enemy shots. Hell, sometimes the damage drop off is a factor, and the length of time your tank can stand being under fire can depend on how far your tank was from the enemy. Moving on to weapons, all these standard upgrades have been tweaked so that each upgrade truly feels different from the others, like the sniper branches being anti-unit GSRs, anti-tank Brondels, and support intercepts. Some of these do feel gimmicky though, like the Gallian A scout rifles. They are unable to intercept while dealing high amounts of damage, and the intercept rifle itself does just feel extremely weak. Both of these are purposely designed that way, but it just kind of feels a little bit off in the game. Another nice change is that engineers now have their own grenades that go farther and deal more damage than the standard type, making them have their own niche as grenadiers. The DLC weapons rewarded by completing the ED detachment skirmishes have also been completely reworked to have their own unique effects, like crazy intercept range debuff weapons or a gun that can shoot through multiple targets. One thing to note, the Lancer unique, while having a really cool effect, does have a chance of crashing the game. The last thing I want to talk about though are the changes to potentials. Some got replaced like Phoenix and double movement, while others were rebalanced like Marina's My Way, increasing damage instead of evasion, which is sort of a trend in this mod. Evasion isn't the most consistent mechanic in Valkyria Chronicles, so many potentials that affected the stat were changed to modify other more important stats, a welcome change since evading is never something the player really depends on. The proc rate of these potentials have all been altered, most having much higher activation rates outside of extremely debilitating debuffs, making most units' performances much more consistent overall and giving them all a defined playstyle. And that is just a general overview of what Gallian Crossfire changes. It simply enhances many of the existing mechanics in the base game while only adding in a handful of new twists to the mix. I will say though, these new twists are extremely important depending on the mission, especially in puzzle missions that have a specific way to complete them. Gallian Crossfire can make these missions a living hell, which can sometimes force the player to use tactics that actually abuse the game's engine, throwing all immersion out of the window. But on the other hand, a few missions actually do get easier, allowing you to shortcut through certain sections, which feels super cool when done right. And now for the final piece of my Let's Play nightmare, Imperial Onslaught by DoomyDoom. This mod really changes how Valkyria Chronicles is played even more than Gallian Crossfire, despite having less changes overall. One thing I do want to note is that while this mod can be installed by itself, it is intended to complement the Gallian Crossfire mod, and all my experiences with Imperial Onslaught is with both of them paired together. Now the first and most important change to the game is the addition of ammunition to most of the regular weaponry. Some guns still have infinite ammo, such as select unique weapons and all weapons wielded by the enemy, but this one aspect limits how many targets a single unit can deal with, and makes you play around with a larger group of units, whereas in the base game, and also in Gallian Crossfire, you can get away with using only a handful of units. The downside of this wonderful feature is that the UI of Valkyria Chronicles just does not have a good way of conveying this information. It is done very, choppily. In battle, instead of the infinity sign on the weapon, you will see an attack counter. It goes down by 1 every time you normal attack, team attack, or counter attack, and as long as that number is above the number of shots your gun is actually going to fire, you can attack and intercept. Outside of battle, you have to jump around in the R&D for the gun's shots count, and in the squad barracks to see its ammo count. Annoying, and it's just best to have the Imperial Onslaught guide on you when you're gearing up units. The other change that made this mod feel much more different from the normal game is the reduced command points given to the player. This keeps the player from making massive advances in a single turn and actually gives the enemy a chance to fight back. Now, one thing I did notice during my Let's Play was that after a point the AI did simply spam shock trooper reinforcements and send them charging at the player with no regard for their own safety. While it was weird to see, it does still introduce a level of challenge where you do need to factor defense into your team. Those are the main changes, but there are some minor alterations to potentials and orders that do overwrite Gallian Crossfire's changes, the most notable being the alterations to the strength and potential added in Crossfire. Really though, the changes to command points and the ammo system are the real draws here, especially in how the mod makes engineers significantly more useful, as they are now needed to quickly resupply all units so that they can attack or intercept, rather than simply being a healing class who occasionally needs to come out to clear mines. Overall, Gallian Crossfire and Imperial Onslaught are great mods to make the unholy mix between SRPGs and FPSs even more harmonious than it is in vanilla Valkyria Chronicles. Moving around no longer is a free action, and units have to dart around dodging fire from across the map while also worrying about their ammunition. So if you're looking for a more fun way to play Valkyria Chronicles, while maybe still not having the funds to just go buy the newest version of it, then I do recommend dusting off your old copy and outfitting it with these mods for a much more compelling and difficult experience. And even if you have never played Valkyria Chronicles before, maybe instead of burning an entire $60 on the newest title, you can just spend $20 on the original and play around with these mods. But that's all I have to say. Leave in the comment section your thoughts, maybe yell at me for taking this long to make this damn video. And also feel free to check me out on my twitch.tv page. I have started streaming on that more often, and I am streaming Valkyria Chronicles 4. But with that, I will see you guys next time. Peace!